Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today for the this webinar. Today we have Zita Magnuson and Mary Quirk from Hands-On Twin Cities and the Minnesota Association for Volunteer Administration joining us. And before we get into more information from them, I'm going to ask everybody who's on the call to introduce themselves just so we have a sense of who is on this call today. So I'm going to go ahead and unmute everybody's lines, and if we can start with Dan. So if y'all just...
I'm Dan Wilson from the Second Harvest Northern Lakes Food Bank up in Duluth, just the agency relations coordinator up there.
Great, thanks Dan. And then it looks like we have Diane and Jennifer.
Hello. Hi, this is Diane, agency. And Jennifer, the same.
All right, and Jan Larson. Okay, Jan, you may have to unmute your line.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay, Jan Larson from Second Harvest North Central Food Bank in Grand Rapids. I'm member
Great.
agent.
Great, thank you. We have Lisa Boyd. Lisa?
Hi, everybody. Lisa Boyd with Second Harvest Heartland, Agency Relations Account Specialist in Minneapolis. And I am going to mute myself because I have a cough and a crying cat.
Thank you, Lisa, and your cat. I'm going to let Mary and Zita introduce themselves as well, but before I do that, I just wanted to say I'm Katie Bull. I'm an Agency Relations Account Specialist at Second Harvest. And then we also have Jessica Hultgren on the line. She's just having a few audio issues here, but she is our volunteer manager, our director of volunteer services, pardon me, at Second Harvest Heartland. So I'm going to go ahead and let Zita, or Mary, go ahead and introduce yourself, and then we'll turn it to Zita.
I'm Mary Quirk with the Minnesota Association for Volunteer Administration, or often best known as MAVA. And I've gotten to work in the past with Katie Bull in webinars, so it's really fun to be back webinaring together again. And we're just really pleased to get to talk about this opportunity.
Great, thank you, Mary. And Zita Magnuson.
Thanks, Katie. Hi, everyone. Zita Magnuson. I'm with Hands-On Twin Cities, and I'm going to kick us off this webinar, and then Mary and I will tag team and go through the slides with you. We're just really thrilled to have you on board with us, so thanks for walking through this little journey with us. So first off, I'll just skip forward. Oh, no, I guess not. There we go. Okay. So, starting off, what is a service enterprise? This is the definition that Points of Light uses, and I think the key words on this document are leveraging volunteers and their skills, and that really is what we're talking about. How do we work with organizations that already work well with their volunteers, have processes in place? What can we do to take it to the next level? How can we deepen the involvement of volunteers? So that's our goal with a service enterprise, and that's our working definition at this point. And how we got there, the next slide is really giving a snapshot of the research that's taken place to get us to where we are today. So there was a consulting firm that used the data from, you can see it on there, the CCAT, which is the Core Capacity Assessment Tool. And it was an online survey that measures a nonprofit's effectiveness. And what they did, they took the information from 652 organizations that they analyzed, and they found that 18% of those organizations self-identify themselves as weak in the area of volunteer management, and you can see 64% consider themselves as satisfactory and 17% consider themselves as strong. So what they did, they took that less than 20%, or that 17% of the nonprofits believing that they're strong in volunteer management, and wanted to digest a little bit more information. How can we use the information from those 17% to see how we can take what they're doing really well and share that across the network? And so from the research, there were 5 findings, I guess, significant findings, and one of them is that organizations are significantly and markedly stronger for nonprofits with a strong volunteer management model, which we pretty much know, right? If you've got a strong way of working with volunteers, an effective way of working with volunteers, that is going to assist you across the entire organization. And the second finding, when organizations engage and manage any number of volunteers well, they're significantly better led and managed. So it appears that there's a strong correlation of simply managing volunteers well and some measure of organizational effectiveness. Seems to go hand in hand. The third one is we're not only able to lead and manage volunteers better, but those organizations that have that strong process are also more willing to look to see what change can positively happen. They're more adaptable, capable of going to scale. Once you have processes in place, it just makes more sense that you can bring on more volunteers because you already have that process ready to roll with them. And the key factor that the researchers found is that if they deploy 50 plus volunteers and manage them well, that's when you're seeing the significant adaptability and willing to, the capability of taking on more. And then looking to the fourth finding, operating as a service enterprise requires strong and well-developed human resources management practices. So the fourth finding, again, strong and well-developed resources is looking at that unpaid human capital or volunteer employees, if you will. So this means that people are willing to invest the time to define what the work would be by those volunteers, recruit for that particular work, train the volunteers so that they are doing exactly what is needed to drive your mission, and then providing adequate supervision and resources so that the volunteers feel recognized, they understand the impact that they're producing, and giving them leadership roles too, right, and responsibilities. So it's looking at that kind of broad, respect to HR policies within the nonprofit's volunteer resource. And the fifth and final finding, organizations that engage volunteers are equally as effective as their peers without volunteers, but at almost half the median budget. I think this is really a key, that organizations that engage volunteers are equally as effective as their peers without volunteers. I mean, this really gets to the point that volunteers are well-leveraged resources for their skills, their experience, their talents without the cost. So we highlight this one a lot within this work, but we're very excited to have you be a part of this conversation as well. So those are just kind of key findings of the research and those organizations that would be involved with service enterprise. Of course, there's more data, but we just wanted to give you a snapshot of what the clear findings were for the organizations that have gone through this process. And then last year was our pilot in working with a handful of nonprofits. And there's just a couple of quotes from two of the participants from this pilot group. One, David Miller from Neighbors, Inc., how he's saying that they really feel better prepared to engage volunteers more fully. So just thought we would share that along with another one from Interfaith Outreach and Community Partners. So we pulled a couple of our food shelf partners to show you what they were saying and the benefits raised by participating. And then the next slide, again, this is a Points of Light initiative that MAVA and HOTC are working on. So this is from the 3 to 6 month evaluation we've learned 60% of organizations increase the number of volunteers engaged, which is great. We're also looking, in addition to engaging more volunteers, we're also looking at the depth of relationship. And you can see the second bullet, it provided a renewed commitment to upholding volunteer engagement as a priority that adds value. And we really saw this with organizations. They said that not only was there great awareness that was built up from being a part of service enterprise, but just the communication between the different departments, not only the volunteer department, but across the agency, it truly made a great difference. And the third bullet helped to identify the need to refine infrastructure, resource gaps. It really gave people time to step away from their normal work-a-day to take a deeper look at, if you evaluate us against other organizations, where are the gaps? How can we maybe increase or change processes to get us to even a higher plane? So the last slide I'm going to share with you, and then Mary will talk about the actual program model and the steps involved in it. These are the characteristics that we will be looking through in the diagnostic of this service enterprise. So all aspects of the assessment, the training, it all revolves around these 10 characteristics. So if you look around the scope or spokes of the wheel, you can see that it really covers every aspect of engagement, from planning and development, making sure that there is leadership support, and that's a part of the process too that Mary will go through. If we don't have the leadership involved, change is less likely to take place, but it's also looking at, do we have the right resources? Are we able to track and evaluate the volunteers we're working with? Are we reaching out to the right people within the community or other to bring in the right resources? So it's a wonderful wheel of opportunity to think through the process and bring us all to a higher plane, as I said. So I'll turn it over to Mary to talk through the program model.
Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and unmute Mary now, and then Mary, should we go ahead and show your slides or your screen, or do you want us to click through on this one?
I will let you click through here.
Okay.
As we'll go on to the next slide. And I think what I'll do is just step back a little bit for you and explain why we're here talking with you today. And what we're really overall wanting to talk with you about is an opportunity here in Minnesota for organizations that work in the hunger relief area to be able to have some new resources on building volunteer capacity. We're really excited to get to talk with you about that. And how this opportunity came about is through, there's really only one pot of federal funding that helps organizations build capacity for volunteer engagement. It's the Volunteer Generations Grant. And that is kind of very hard money to get. It only comes open about every 4 years. And we had the opportunity this spring in Minnesota through working with Serve Minnesota to submit an application for that. The funding underneath that pot of money needs to go through our service commissions. And Hands-On Twin Cities and MAVA worked with Serve Minnesota to put together a proposal very hurriedly in the early months of the summer. And our proposal that we put in was built around helping organizations overall in Minnesota build their capacity for volunteer engagement. And we decided for each year, it's up to a 3-year grant, that we would focus kind of on one sector, and one of the sectors that the Corporation for National and Community Service of the funding is through focuses in on. So for this first year, we're focusing in with hunger relief organizations, and we picked that as our first year focus because we've appreciated getting to work with so many of you over the years in a variety of different projects. So that's kind of why we're talking with you here today, and we're really happy. Zita and I talked with Second Harvest a few weeks ago about to proceed with this, and they made the offer, which was very kind, to gather together some of their partners. So that's a little bit of background on why we're here. And with this overall Volunteer Generations Grant project, there are 2 real components. And one component is the one that Zita's been talking about, which is service enterprise, which is for nonprofits that are working at a really high level of volunteer engagement who want to move to a higher level. And so this is the piece we're talking about right here, is for those organizations that you have that you partner with around hunger relief that already have a solid volunteer program in place but want to move to this highest level that Zita was talking about, this defined as service enterprise. Also through this project, we'll be having another tract, which is for organizations who are more trying to get their best practices for volunteer engagement together. And with that tract, what we'll be doing is offering two things. One is the 2-day MAVA Best Practice Series, the Volunteer Leadership Impact Series. We're offering that for gaining best practices. And MAVA and Hands-On Twin Cities will be working together to offer some shorter workshops and engaging skill-based volunteers. So there's these two sections, this service enterprise section and the section of offering the more best practice training. And both sections we're going to try to make available in the Metro and in Greater Minnesota. And with the service enterprise piece, we've talked about holding a cohort around this in the Metro starting in spring. So that's kind of one piece for organizations who are close to the Metro that might be part of. And likewise with the best practice series, Hands-On Twin Cities is going to host one of those working with Second Harvest starting in April, for 2 days in April, for organizations who want to get their best practices, and there'll be quite a nice price break for organizations in the hunger relief area. So that'll be coming up in the spring. And for those of you in Greater Minnesota, we're hoping to get the service enterprise around the state over this 3 years, at least once to Rochester, St. Cloud, and Duluth, and possibly another location. So we'll be getting this out to you, and we'll also be getting the best practice series around the state with a discount for hunger relief organizations. So does that kind of put a perspective on hopefully on what we're doing here? If you have any questions, just put them in the chat feature. So now we'll get back to service enterprise. So the service enterprise, which again, this is the piece that's geared for the organizations that you may know as partners that already have a good volunteer program in place but want to go that extra mile to really get those best capacity measures out of volunteers. And it has this process right here of different stages. And it starts with an application process to Hands-On Twin Cities to MAVA to be part of. And we'll be getting information out to you about how organizations can apply. Then there's an introductory orientation that's a lot like what we're covering here that we'll do with organizations. And one of the things that's so keen about this is next is the diagnostic step. We do a pre-training meeting that has results. Then there's 4 training and coaching sessions. And then the end product of this is organizations who meet this standard for being a service enterprise that Zita was talking about actually get certified. So it's something that they can show that they have gotten to this level. And then after that, there's continuing to work and then going through becoming recertified. And Katie, would you move me on to the next slide, please? Okay, thank you. So I'll just walk through those pieces real quickly here. One of the things that has MAVA and Hands-On Twin Cities really excited about this process is it's research-based. As Zita talked about some of the research. And organizations, the first thing they get to do is take this really good diagnostic that helps them see where they're at with volunteer engagement in relationship to their overall functions. And then we'll move on to the next slide. After that, somebody from Hands-On Twin Cities or MAVA will meet individually with each organization to review the results of their diagnostic. And we ask organizations, if they want to be part of the service enterprise, to put together a team that we work with that represents the whole organization, the people who work with volunteers in the program area, the volunteer management staff, but also for this process to work, part of the team needs to be upper management. If it's a medium to smaller size organization, the CEO or executive director. If it's a big organization, somebody in the top management to be part of this. And this whole model is built on the whole organization working together to make changes. And it's that team that takes this original diagnostic test plus is part of this pre-training meeting. And we'll move on, Katie, to the next slide. And then there's a chance to go through a 4-part training process. And this is 4 half days. We do this in Greater Minnesota. We may combine it into 2 days or full days, or we'll bet you're creative on it. But it's a 4-part training that's not on the best practices, because organizations who are looking for that should really be taking the best practice series. But this training is really about how you identify in your organization the changes you want to make to move to that highest level of volunteer engagement. And it's the 4 parts are basically a change management process where your team is making an action plan, and then you're working together through that action plan and how you get those changes to occur in the organization. And in thinking about who would want to be part of this in this training, it's those organizations that have good volunteer management in places, but it might be your organizations as more hubs that often We're finding that hub organizations that engage volunteers are just absolutely excellent for going through this and becoming a certified service enterprise, and then they can help understand it better to share that with other people. So Katie, next slide, please. And then, another really cool part about this is it doesn't stop with the training. It moves on to, after the training, there's a personalized coaching process where each organization gets coaching on pieces of their action plan that they've identified that they want some more help on. And this last time when we did it in the pilot that Zita was talking about, we found a number of organizations were looking for help in how to train their overall staff on volunteer engagement. That was the most common. Some were looking for some coaching on doing some measurements, both to get input from staff and volunteers about where they wanted to go with volunteer engagement. So quite a range of areas that were involved in the coaching. And we'll move on to the next slide here. And then after organizations have gone through this whole process, if they've made significant progress, and to get the certification, organization has to make quite a bit of progress during this process. But then we go through a certification review process that's well-defined and has all these criteria out there to see if an organization qualifies to become a service enterprise. You know, what's so nice about getting the certification is that then this is a seal that you can use to show your community and your volunteers that you're operating at this high level of volunteer engagement. Organizations who've gone through the service enterprise in the original pilot projects around the country, and especially in California, found out that this certification was really a useful piece for funders because they were able to tell their funders that an investment in their organization was amplified many times over by their effective use of volunteers. So we'll move on to the next slide here. And I just wanted to point out to you that organizations that are part of this are really joining a project that has all the key players in the volunteers infrastructure in the country as part of it. From Corporation National Community Service, Points of Light, Reimagining Service is a national organization that founded many of these materials, the high quality research from the TCC group, and the University of Texas at Austin, California volunteers. You're in there with kind of the best thinkers in the country in volunteer engagement. And we'll quickly move on here. As you can see, Zita and I are trying to move forward so we get to the point of your questions. Now, this service enterprise package, as the way it's laid out, is very intensive. It's an intensive change management, consulting, assessment, training process. And the value of it, the cost for each organization for doing it, is between $5,000 and $6,000. So it's a very, very comprehensive package. And with our funding from the Corporation of National Community Service, we're able to reduce that price for all organizations in the range of $500 to $1,000. But for hunger relief organizations, we're doing an extra discount on top of that. So organizations who are smaller could participate and get all of this $5,000 package for $375 on up to $750 if it's a very large organization. And if there's a hunger relief organization that really wants to do this and invest their time in it, they're welcome to talk about additional scholarships on top of this. So we want to make it very affordable. In addition to the financial investment here, we just want to let you know that organizations are also asked to make a commitment of time because it takes time to work through these type of changes. And it will be 3 to 7 staff that are attending the training, including some upper management staff, and being part of this action plan development. And we want to make sure, emphasize again that it really does take the whole organization. It's not just the volunteer department. We need to have somebody who, at the executive level, when we've done it before, it's been great to have actually some fundraising staff as part of it. We've also had some HR staff. Katie, would you move on here to our next slide? And to let you know, for the group that we're doing in the metro that's going to be focused around hunger relief organizations, and this will be really for those of you who have either are close to the metro or partners, we're going to be getting application material out in December. Applications are due January 22nd. The organization will be taking this diagnostic in February, and the trainings will be in March and April with the consultings in May. So that's the time frame for that. And we're planning on doing in the spring one of the service enterprise rounds in Greater Minnesota. We've been tentatively thinking about Rochester, but we're really open to where the interest is the highest on doing it. We want to get it once in Greater Minnesota. And if a hunger relief organization participates wherever they are in the state this first year, they will get that special discount on price, as they will if they're interested in the best practice series that will be offered around. And we're hoping, over 3 years to get the service enterprise out around the state. Katie, I think we're ready to move on. Okay, and now I think, Zita, you and I have probably covered the basics we wanted to cover. I'm just interested to hear what questions you have or what you think about this, how it's all striking you. And again, it's just kind of thinking it's a two-part process that's coming up. There's the service enterprise for those organizations at that high level of volunteer engagement, and then there's this more basic training that we'll be offering around for organizations that want to build their capacity at now basic best practice level. So that's it for me, and now it's up for you for your questions and comments.
So I'm going to go ahead and unmute everybody, and you're welcome to mute yourself if you have any background noise that you want to get out of there, but it sounds like we're pretty good at this point. Feel free to chat in questions too, and it looks like Lisa has a question. When does the basic training become available?
The basic training as far as this module, the 4 pieces, for the hunger relief group, we're looking at that would start in March, and we have some tentative dates that I think is one of your background material pieces. We're looking at that would be March and April, and then the one we're hoping to do, our first one in Greater Minnesota, will be more starting in April going into May. And for the basic training, I'm sorry, I was not reading the question correctly. The basic training that the one we're going to do with Second Harvest, that'll be focused here with a metro location, is going to be in later April. I think we're setting it's in the 20s of April. And then as far as that around the state, we're working with sites right now. And if you'd like to bring it to your part of the state, just shoot me an email, because we want to get it out all around this year. What other questions? Or Zita, what did I miss? You can add some comments here too.
Well, I'm going to move to the next slide too. Whoops. I wanted to go to the last slide because it's got contact information, so if people wanted to, there you go. So if you did want to send Mary or me an email regarding any questions that come up after the time together, then please feel free to do so.
And Jan, it looks like Jan just wanted to clarify this would be for our agencies, correct, not just our food bank? And I guess my question would be...
we're talking, I'm trying to make sure that that's an important point, that your agencies are very welcome, encouraged to be part of this. I think that would be absolutely exciting. And they're also, this is open for both and for your food banks and for your partners. What else? How does this strike you? Do you see potential interest in it? I think you're unmuted, so you're welcome to dive in. And
Yes, it looks like Dan, you're self-muted, and Lisa's self-muted. I'm not sure if Jessica and Jim, if you're talking, we're not hearing anything that you're saying. But feel free to chat in anything too if you're not able to speak through the phone or computer. Somebody's typing.
Yeah.
Oh, is that Jessica?
Yes, I'm typing because I don't know how to self-mute. I was just going to type, if the food banks on the phone were interested in promoting this to their partner agencies, do you have any ideas or restrictions on how they would do that? Like, is there a flyer available or a PDF or a link or anything like that?
so Jessica, your question is for the people on the phone, what would be the most useful for them to have to promote it? Is that right?
Yes. Well, I don't know if my question is more, I guess, directed to you. Do you have any marketing materials available that they could use to promote the opportunity to their partner agencies?
You know, I think we're interested in hearing what would be the most useful, but I think, you know, we're envisioning doing a piece that's, you know, targeted right towards the hunger relief area that talks about the benefits, and a little bit, you know, more polished than our question and answer piece. But it'll be, you know, your input and what would be the most useful. And I see we have a question here about the criteria for service enterprise, and we have that on one of our sheets, and we can get that out as part of what Jessica is talking about, the information for organizations to look at. Because a lot of organizations, I think, are kind of on the cusp between the two, and we'll put in our best kind of definition of which route is better to go. And it may be for some organizations, they may end up wanting to do both. If they're kind of in the cusp, it may make sense to do both, to do Super Enterprise, but then also brush up on the best practices. What else do you have to answer in that question?
Well, right now, people could go to our website. There is a link on both the hands-on and the MAVA website for additional information. It does take you to the application, so you could walk through and see the expectations there. But in addition to what's out there right now and what will be developed as a targeted document, we are happy to answer any questions, or if you wanted to have a conference call with people within your site or within your other partner agencies. I mean, we're just in that conversation mode. We want to get the information out. So we'd be happy to talk with anyone to answer any specific questions, because we know this is truly a wonderful benefit to the state, and we want to make it as available as possible. So please don't hesitate to reach out if we can answer any other questions.
And I think for, especially for the Second Harvest folks in the metro area, just think about if that's something that we do want to do, since it seems like the timeline for this is coming up pretty quickly as far as the applications. Would that be helpful to our partners to have Zita and or Mary or one of us kind of go through some of this information again with them in this in the same kind of format? I also had a question just about the size of agencies. It sounds like there's some flexibility. I know that you had said that you wanted 3 to 6 people or something like that to attend the training. And so if there was an agency that was interested in being a service enterprise, but they only had 2 staff members, would you discourage them from doing the project because it might not be the right place for them right now, or would you accept them and just make
Absolutely, we would take a look at them. We would encourage them to have an application. This doesn't have to be just staff.
Okay.
If it is a smaller agency, then maybe there's a key board member. Maybe there's a key volunteer or two. That would be great. If they have a veteran volunteer, someone who's really taken over great responsibility within the organization, we couldn't work without them, I think they would be ideal to have participate. Would you agree, Mary?
Yes, yes. And MAVA went through the process, and we have a swapping staff size of 2. But there are organizations that are smaller than us, but it worked really well. Our board member, who works in our volunteer resources, went through the process and was really the leader of our team. And that worked great. And we have an organization of staff of 7 in our next round. And what they're going to do, because they really can't have more than 2 consistent people out of the office, what they're doing is having 2 people of staff come to the training, and then they're going to rotate between other staff people of each staff person attending the training once, so they get a chance to participate. So there's lots of ways we can work with smaller organizations, and there have been all volunteer organizations who've gone through the service enterprise that it's really useful.
Great, thank you.
Good question. And I like that idea, Katie, too, of how, as you're working with your food banks, there are ways that Zita or I could help you on presenting the materials or being on a phone call or a webinar or almost anything, because we found pretty much all the organizations that have joined up and been part of Service Enterprise, we have talked with them quite a bit ahead of time. It's a very individualized process to talk through ahead of time to make sure that it's the right place for your organization. But I think everybody we've talked with has actually ended up deciding to do it, so it's good to talk it through.
I'm curious, Jan. Jan wants to know, can we look at the webinar again later on and print the slides out? I have recorded the webinar, so we'll have that. Are you guys okay with us sharing the PowerPoint?
Absolutely.
Okay, so we can send out a PowerPoint as well. I'm just curious too, Jan and Dan, if you had any thoughts on how this might work for some of your agencies. I think you're probably dealing with even more volunteer-led, very small agencies out there. So I'm curious if either of you have any thoughts on what that would look like and if this would be something that would work for them.
Yeah, this is Jan from Second Harvest North Central, but I guess For me, all our agencies are pretty much all volunteer, and there might be 1 or 2 volunteers per agency. And so I think they'd be interested in it, but I think the money would be the problem for paying for it.
And in that case, if somebody's interested, we'd like to talk that through because
Right.
with doing a parity in the hunger relief area, we built in some
Okay.
so that's
Okay, and then also if it was up in this area, so they didn't have to travel a long way.
And I think, what is the center of your area?
Pardon me?
What town would you consider the center of your area?
Probably like Aiken.
Okay, so that way. Yeah, that's where, as far as the best practice material, that's pretty easy for us to get around the state. And if you have organizations that might be interested, that would be interested in talking about that. For doing the service enterprise, it'd be for in that area. I know it's a ways into Duluth or down to St. Cloud. We would just have to talk it through if you think there's an interest, and see if we can get a location that's close there. I know Brainerd is a little bit closer in, and that could possibly be a lot.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Brainerd, a lot of good things happen in Brainerd as far as driving from a lot of areas. So.
Right.
And then we have a question from Dan. Great question. We should have thought of this. Would this be an option for Wisconsin agencies too? Because we do have some agencies that we work with in Wisconsin counties.
I thought about that. I was thinking about and our funding is for Minnesota. I have to admit, I just don't know. That would be. I'll make a note to ask that question.
Well, we deal with a lot of situations where we do have to say this is only for Minnesota, and so that's an okay thing, I would think, at least for Second Harvest Heartland. But yeah, it would be interesting to know.
Yeah, I should find out because Wisconsin is doing service enterprise over in Milwaukee area.
Yeah.
But that's a long ways away.
Exactly.
From the side of Wisconsin.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I know Wisconsin's looking at eventually doing in other areas, but I'll try to get an answer for this funding if there's anything that is restrictive to Minnesota. Yeah, good question. Anything else? We don't want to take too much of your time. We'd like to be respectful of that. But any more questions? I want to make sure that you leave with anything that would be useful to know. I guess I have a question for in looking at the organizations that are just really in the process of getting their volunteer engagement best practices in place. Do any of you have kind of a clump of organizations in your part of the state that you think might be willing to attend or interested in attending a 2-day training on volunteer management best practices? I know that's a pretty good chunk of time to invest in training.
Yeah, I guess this is Jan again. I guess I can't answer that.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, that would, most of them are older volunteers too.
Yeah. And we.
So.
Yeah, and maybe that's something we could work with you on to assess if there is an interest, because we do have a lot of volunteers who take that series from their volunteer role, but it's just a question of if they would be interested, if we could make it close by for them, if they would be interested.
Right.
I think I think there's a sector of my agencies that I work with that are definitely, have a few staff and are kind of on that cusp. They're not already engaging in this sort of thing, but would be good, it might be a good next step. But then I have a lot of agencies that are very dedicated, do a lot, but the people, like Jan said, are volunteers, and so a lot of the stuff they do normally is in the evening or on weekends, and so it might be tough for them, especially if it's 2 days in a row or 2 days in the same week, to get out of their full-time job. Lisa says, I can think of quite a few agencies I work with who would benefit from the best practices training, but would find it hard to be absent for 2 days for training. So, yeah, the 2 full days might be tough, but I don't know if we could work
do 4 half days.
Yeah, if we could look at doing the half days and spreading it out a little bit more. And I don't know if webinar options too might be
Way to
something
go.
that's of interest.
Because we have done, it's not, it's not best to do it by webinar, but we have. And so we'd like to work with you to figure out how to get the best practice training out in the way.
I'm thinking that could work better up here just because we are so spread out.
Okay. Yeah. Maybe we have a project here to try.
Yeah.
Pretty cool.
Or Lisa's comments or evenings, weekend options.
Yeah, yeah.
Maybe we could do like a late Friday and all day Saturday or something.
Yeah.
And I
So
think,
that's
again, it depends on who is involved. So I think that's, you know, once we get to the state of actually reaching out to people, we could certainly do a little bit of gauging on what works best for them.
Yeah, that would be good because I think it's, you know, the key is to get this material to people in a way that's easy for them to access.
Right.
Yeah. So, yeah, we can, I know that Kate said that she wanted us to follow up and figure out when we're going to do that in the metro area. And for those of you who don't know, Kate Burgraff did have her baby, and so that's why she's not here today, and we're still getting used to not having her around. But so Jessica and I will connect and connect with Mary and Zita about some next steps as well. But please feel free, like Mary and Zita have or said, if you have any other questions, let us know. Or let them know, but if you have anything that you want to share with Second Harvest or anything else, or, you know, those of us who are with Second Harvest, if we have ideas on how this might work best for some of our agencies, then we can talk about that too. So, Mary and Zita, anything else we should know about?
Just
Thank you
for being on the call today, and hopefully we can get something rolling. We're very excited to work with your agencies. So thank you for your time today.
And thank
Thank
you.
you.
All right, thanks everybody. We'll go ahead and turn off the webinar here. Have a great day.
Thank you.